Hello, beautiful people. It's Sunday night. The name of the show is Intuitive Inc., and I am Servet Hassan. We've got another really great show for you tonight. The book we're going to be discussing is called Heaven is for Healing, A Soul's Journey After Suicide. It's written by Dr. Joe Gallenberger. It's a fascinating book, and it starts out with one of his other books, which is Brothers Forever, because his brother Peter committed suicide. And then it goes into 20 years later. So it's a long process that he's been writing this book. But anyway, Dr. Joe Gallenberger was started out as a psychotherapist, and he got very involved in the Monroe Institute, and then later on psychokinesis. So we're going to be discussing all of those things, which are fascinating. And his other books are Inner Vegas, Creating Miracles, Abundance, and Health, and Liquid Luck, the Good Fortune Handbook. So we're going to talk about all of those. Welcome, Dr. Joe Gallenberger. Thank you so much for being with me here tonight.
Thank you, Servet. I'm glad to be here with you.
Thanks so much. This is I just finished the book. You did a CD, The Ocean Heart. It's a meditation for healing a broken heart and facing the stresses of the world with inner peace. It's fascinating, and it works. So we're going to talk about that as well, because it's a really great CD. I enjoyed it thoroughly. I've listened to thousands of them over the years, and this is one I particularly found that will help heal anything, especially grief, but it could be used for many things. So we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so let's start. This all started pretty long time ago with your brother, right?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. The first book, Brothers Forever, when did that actually come out?
That came out, my brother committed suicide about 25 years ago, and Brothers Forever came out about 20 years ago. So it described the grieving process and me contacting him on the other side, those kind of things, pretty much covering the first year after his death. And then the newest book, Heaven is for Healing, kind of came about because his suicide really changed my focus in my life to helping people create an abundant life and, one of greater joy. And so 20 years at his anniversary of his death, I said, gee, it's really affected me a lot. And I also wondered what he had been doing, quote, on the other side over these years. So Heaven is for Healing picks up and further contacts with him that maybe over the last year or so. Book came out in March of this year, So it does cover quite a long period of time.
Right, it certainly does. And so, but that's what makes it so wonderful too, and one of the things I really liked about your book is that you take away, or you try to take away, the stigma that surrounds suicide, because really there's something like over 1 million people a year that kill them, that commit suicide globally. And that comes down to, I think you said in your book, one person every 40 seconds. That's a lot of people. And, there's so much that's around, a lot of people still regard, because of religion, because of old beliefs, that that it's almost a sin, that there's a real stigma around it, that there's something wrong with somebody that sometimes there is, because they're mentally not well. But I think it kind of shines a different light on that too. Was that your intent?
One of my main reasons of writing the book was when my brother died, he had shot himself in the head, and the police called me, and I had to talk to my folks and give them the message. And as my mom was keening in the background with the grief of losing her son, she immediately went to, now he would be in hell for all eternity. And so on top of the grief that the families naturally feel, there's often this heavy religious cultural bias in Roman times, they would put the family sometimes in prison, take their all their lands and property. That continued into the Middle Ages. It's still a felony in many countries, and in no way do I want to encourage suicide. I think it's a poor decision, if you will, but I did want to really explore deeply, and I found that basically all death leads to light, and everybody's met with great compassion. You might have hellish thoughts and emotions that you're carrying over from your life experience, and you need to confront that, confront what your life would have been like if you didn't leave on your own, by your own hand, and see the effect on loved ones and many different things that make suicide not a good idea. But we really don't have to worry about being in hell for all eternity.
Well, that's a good thing. No, and I liked that. You said that all life leads to light, which is, I believe, true.
Yes, it seems all experience is treasured. One of my first messages my brother sent me was kind of a road sign with a gavel and a line through it with the thought, "No judgment." He was just so happy to see that there was not some kind of vindictive, judgmental God there waiting to punish him.
Right.
So
right.
That's a powerful thing, to not have to worry about that.
Right. So you went from being, well, actually, while you were still being a psychotherapist, you got involved in the Monroe Institute, which deals with a lot of this to start with, correct?
Yes. Bob Monroe was famous for out-of-body travel work, and he developed the Institute, and when I found the place about 28 years ago, I was just entranced because it was a place you could go and explore consciousness with no dogma. People that were Republicans, Democrats, atheists, Buddhists, fundamental ministers, all kinds of people were treated with great respect there. And I became a trainer and been a trainer there for 25 years. One of the things that they developed was a program called Lifeline, which engages in what we could call soul rescue work, working with people as they are on the other side when they need some assistance. And in fact, that program was, they did a TV show on it, on The Unexplained, and during that show they sent people to document what people were finding, and found verification of some lies people were reporting back even into the 1800s, that they could find people corresponding to what the meditators found. So Monroe's quite scientifically based as much as you can be in this area. That appealed to me too.
Right. Are you still teaching there?
Yes, I am.
Good. So can you connect with in this program Lifeline, because I read about it in your book as well, can you connect with somebody on purpose, or is it just whoever needs help at the time that comes to you?
Both tend to happen. So a person could go looking for a relative that they would like to find out how they're doing, those kind of things, as well as within the meditative system, after getting in a very high, relaxed, open-hearted state, you affirm that you're willing to be of service to anyone who could use assistance. And in that case, you come across people who appear to be strangers in terms of not knowing them in this life.
Right. But you may have known them in a different life, too.
Yes, that
right?
gets interesting. Sometimes it seems like we actually may be assisting other parts of us from other incarnations, if you will. There's times even where something in this life is reclaimed, like say you were in 4th grade and you were coloring happily along, and the teacher came by your desk and said, "Johnny, you're not coloring in the lines, you'll never be an artist," and you shut down all your creativity. Lifeline even sometimes reclaims parts like that from this life, but mostly other life experiences, and maybe some in your soul group, if you will, or other incarnations. But sometimes it's something where you might have affinity to. I was in a motorcycle accident when I was 21 and had an out-of-body experience, was in body cast for about a year and in hospital. And so I might come across people who have just died in a motorcycle accident. Other people make specialties even to go to concentration camps like Treblinka and clear energy there.
Wow. Well, I think that's, now, you talk about a woman that channeled a lot of your communication with your brother, but you also had some yourself directly, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
In the beginning, was it with the channeler, Pam, that you got messages from him?
Yes, Pete died coincidentally a week after that first lifeline that the Monroe Institute ever did, and I was a participant in that first program. And when I come home and found out the news, when you're in that kind of immediate savage grief, it's tough to meditate. And so as I would meditate at that time, I'd feel some angelic consolation, if you will, but no sign of Pete's presence. But right from that first 12 hours after his death, some of the Lifeline trainers began honing in on him and giving me reports. And then I did talk with the channeler, Pam, who I had known for years before and who had done some very verifiable channels for me, including stock market tips and when gold would come up and down, things that were verifiable. So I'd had sessions with her before where she had warned me about Pete's path looking like it was leading towards suicide. And then fairly soon after his death, we started some systematic contact with him. My own contacts with him then, probably after 2 or 3 months, began to become more often as I kind of cooled down a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, that's really interesting. So he was sending, well, he wasn't sending, but she was able to communicate and get messages for him for quite a while, because I think that went on for about 3 years, and then you stopped, right? And then you picked it up later. I have a question.
Yes.
Is Pete still on the other side?
Yes, when, again, this is just last fall when we started sessions again, we focused on what are the death processes like in any death and how you're met and how you're moved beyond the sort of near-death experience to what other stages there might be there. And they described a variety of ways to help people, much like there's a variety of suicide from somebody who might have 2 weeks to live in terminal cancer pain and just checking out a little early,
right,
to, fortunately, last, I think, month we had an 8-year-old boy in the U.S. commit suicide after being bullied on a day. Folks who've been in grinding depression for decades, which is more of my brother's case. So each person is met with different conditions. They called my brother Pete kind of an average Joe. They made a joke, since my name is Joe, is that it has taken him now 25 years to be ready now to be considering another incarnation or another life. And in fact, it seems like over there's a potential to have what we could call non-physical lives, almost like a vivid lucid dream, where you have all this experience, but you're not in a physical body.
Right.
And they sometimes appeal to people who have had a real rough time on Earth because they're kind of reluctant to come back into this low Earth radiation, if you will.
Right.
And so it looks like Pete's going to be choosing a couple of those non-physical lives first, almost like Olympic training to get ready to come back into a physical existence. Because what they're saying is when you come into physical, the challenges and things are coded into your very DNA of yourself and your family, and it can be a little more challenging to remember your spiritual perspectives and things.
Right, correct. Well, I totally, first of all, I don't think there is any time on that side, because spiritually, I think that's a human condition time that it's a constraint we came up with to give our life some structure, but I don't think they are. But I do think that we do need to learn something. Our soul is constantly needs to grow and learn and be moving forward, and the only way we can do that, I think, is in some kind of physical form, whether it's a lucid dream or whether you're here physically, but that you're actually going through learning process, right?
Yes, it seems like after-death type of learning may occur in classroom type of situations or simulations or many different ways that learning occurs there, but they talk about that a physical life here has tremendous and unique potential for certain kinds of learning that are really helpful to have a physical body to have as you're going through them. And it's almost like you are a bigger player in the field of light, they might call it, that you learn. And it does look like the main thing is to learn to become more and more loving and to be less and less affected by fear. I had a 15-year-old once when I was a therapist say to me, "We live to learn and die to remember."
Wow.
That's kind of a fun way to put it, too.
Yeah. That's pretty profound for a 15-year-old, but it's...
Yeah, and they said it's smacking gum and looking up at the ceiling, you know?
Oh, my gosh, yeah. Well, you know, and as Shakespeare said, all the world's a stage, it's just a dream we're having, you know, but I get that, but I didn't know. Now, is this something that you learned from Pete specifically, or is this something, you know, about the classrooms and the simulations and all, or is this from contact with other souls that have passed?
We've seen things similar to that people would report in the Monroe Institute meditation programs and deep meditation as people sought out and found their loved ones who may not even need assistance but are, you know, further along, that they might come across them in those kind of situations. Some people here will have a memory of what they might call night school. Some of our dreams will be in a classroom, those kind of things, and we might be picking up that same learning kind of function. But with the Heaven is for Healing book, they went into much more detail and how fairly systematic that is. There's always deep respect for the person's choice and their individuality, but there is strong guidance around, if you will, to say, you know, this might be what would be best for you next. For example, when my brother died, as soon as he was over there, he felt great relief, and he kind of said, "Oh, knowing what I know now, I'd like to come right back and do it differently." And they suggested he hang out on what you could call the observation plane for a while and just watch his family, including me, and how we handled different kind of things that had given him a challenge. And he happily agreed to that. And then in other situations, he seemed almost to be academically learning more about the power of feminine energy, which he was not real comfortable with or understanding of, why he was in physical life, learning almost the physics and biochemistry of love and how it is important to humans and how it helps us along our way. So he had some, quote, theoretical time as well, and now seems ready to do something more experiential. And for him this time it seems like it'll be one of these simulated lives, if you want to call it that.
Right. Well, you talk. Let's touch on that, because you talked about how he is observing how even you handle things. And one of the things I liked about your book, Dr. Joe, was that it you were really honest about how you were processing this whole process from the very beginning, from that first phone call from the police in Las Vegas telling you what had happened, and he'd left your card, he'd left instructions, he'd cleaned the room, he'd done all these things, and then how you dealt with that. And you asked yourself some really good questions that anybody that's going through grief is going to ask, like, what do we have to surrender? Why does this happen to somebody? What do we need to do to heal? That kind of thing, too. Can you talk about that a little bit, your experience there?
Sure. It was tough, and I want to mention that because I think it's a kindness if somebody has to go through something like this. Our culture sort of gives us a year to mourn and wear black, and then we're supposed to move on. And with death of a child, with death of people very close to us, particularly with suicide, there's so much woulda, coulda, shoulda. Did love that person in the way they needed to be loved? Could we have done anything different? Those kind of things can kind of drive you nuts, if you will. And the grieving process, even with all my meditation skills and perspective, and even being able to contact them on the other side, there was still a lot of bereavement. I'd lost my best friend. Bereavement, I don't know if it's a word, but
bereavement.
It is highly challenging. One of the things that I found, I had a young child and I had my therapy practice, is I kind of closed myself off so I wouldn't be hurt again. And in fact, grief experts think that a lot of the grieving we feel is because we try to close off our hearts so we won't be hurt again.
Right.
And a lot of the grief is actually anticipatory loss. We'll begin missing them, and if they had been in Europe for a year, we would be, not even missing them yet. But within, hours, we're missing them because we know we'll never see them again. So there's lots of complexity, and then I found that there was quite a few things you could do to make that grief process very soulful, spiritually positive, etc., including, we may get to it later, I developed a image of my heart rather than broken heart, as a heart is a vast ocean of love. And like if you put your hand in water, if I wanted you in my life, you'd be enveloped completely and surrounded. And then if you left, the water would go back to complete, perhaps losing a drop. And so I call that my ocean heart. And in fact, with the content of this book, I developed a meditation CD called Ocean Heart to just help people when they're in very strong loss or grieving or feeling betrayed, anything that might shut down their heart, that this meditation is designed to help with that.
Right. One of the things you say on that CD right off the bat is that, or close to the beginning, is that a heart really can't be broken. It can be, put back together here because it may shatter a little, but it's never broken, and that's one of the myths. And it's a really great CD. Also, the music, the sounds are specifically centered to get you into a certain level of brainwave so that you're in a meditative state faster. Because I can go there very quickly to a really deep meditative state. But this, I think, would really help people that have a hard time with that. So I really encourage that. It's called The Ocean Heart. So while we're at it, let me tell people where they can get Heaven is for Healing, and that's a soul's journey after suicide, but also The Ocean Heart. It's the meditation for healing a broken heart. And your website is heavenisforhealing.com, right?
Yes, that would take you to the page with the book, and on top there would be a tab called Products, and you just click there and you'd see The Ocean Heart as well.
Right.
And these meditations are quite unique. This is based on the kind of brainwave technologies Monroe Institute's been studying for 40 years. So we have people who've never been able to meditate well in other systems, who within 15 minutes can get deeply relaxed and then into a high meditative state within a half hour.
Right.
So you just slap some headphones on, relax, and these things will take you there without much effort.
Right. Well, one of the things that you talk about with going through this whole grieving process, and yeah, I've written a lot about it. My last book is called Life in Transition, so there's a lot about grief in there as well. But I think that it taught you a lot. Like it got you, I think at some point you said in your book that it made you more aware and that you became even more involved in the Monroe Institute, and then you started to change. You became a better person, too. Things were happening to you. You became more abundant. Things.
Yes, I did try to, my brother Pete was handsome, intelligent, hardworking, honest, and he could never get it together in the work area, just for, I think, karmic or soul reasons that we don't have time to get into here. But with that, it left me going, gee, what is needed really for somebody to have a good, abundant life? And it seemed like you also have to feel deserving of goodness, and to vote for love over fear, even when you'd be tempted to be in fear, such as not having money to pay the rent next month. And so that put me on a journey, working with psychokinesis, that ability to affect matter with your mind or your heart. And the book Liquid Luck and Inner Vegas and stuff talk a lot about that, as well as I have a home study course called Sync Creation, from the word hemisync, that really help folks at all levels. If you're doing pretty well, it can help you go into your fullest potential. And if you're struggling, that there's lots of tools in there to really shed the dark energy, if you will, and move into really good, abundant type energy.
Well, right, and I think you said it right on. You really have to feel deserving, because otherwise you can do... you got to believe it on that core bone level in your bones kind of thing, because otherwise you can do things like affirmations and vision boards, and there's nothing wrong with that. You can watch The Secret 5,000 times, which happened when it came out 10 years ago, and people would call me and say, oh, my life hasn't changed. And that's because you really have to get it on a core level. You can't...
not only getting it intellectually, but things like The Secret and vision boards and visioning are great. But to me, that the mind basically is like the steering wheel of a car. It sets the intent, but the car goes nowhere without any gas. And most of these tools you've mentioned talk about the steering wheel, or the intent, if you will, which is important. But the car doesn't go anywhere without gas, and to me, the best gas I've found is the energy of a wide open heart. So that seems to be the missing component a lot of times when people try to implement something like The Secret, is they don't have the high enough energy to really get this going. The second thing that's often missing is they're not really grounded, meaning I fully 100% want to be here on Earth right now, in this body, in my current situation. And you have to be really present, the power of now, Eckhart Tolle idea, really present to begin to affect change, to bring things quickly into manifestation in your life. And so my brother, from the other side's been observing this. He even, one time I was teaching up at Monroe, and one of the participants said, do you have a brother, Pete? And I had not mentioned him, and that he had shown up and asked very respectfully permission to take the meditation course along with her from the other side, if you will. And she was very generous and said, sure, you're welcome to come along, if you will, in this kind of learning about how these principles work.
Right. Well, because that's kind of what he missed. And I think a lot of that was, because I only just read your books. I don't know much more than that. But it sounded like he just got in that pattern of fear, and it never left him. He couldn't shake it quite. And it could be karmic. Yeah. It could be a million things we don't know. But this is one. Now, will the Ocean Heart help with things like the meditation, the CD? Would it help if you open your heart like that with this CD to also create the life you want as well?
Yes. The part of the exercise Ocean Heart is really to explain what we mean by an open heart and give people some good guidance on how to do that in a meditative state. You know, most of our hearts would open if we saw kittens being born or soldiers returning from war and reunited with their family, but it doesn't stay open very long. Mm-hmm. So this goes into that. I have other CDs like the Abundant Heart, specifically using the open heart energy for manifesting, but the Ocean Heart's a great place to start because it'll begin with that most important step.
Right. Okay. And is that also on heavenisforhealing.com?
Yes.
The Abundance Heart, too? Because I find this, I want to talk about psychokinesis because that's fascinating as well. But I am going to open the lines here in case anybody wants to call in and ask Dr. Joe Gallenberger a question. Please do. I mean, he's extremely knowledgeable on this subject of grief and having gone through his brother's passing into another dimension. So give us a call, 949-313-8880. Again, it's 949-313-8880. It could be a question about grief and dealing with it. It could be a question about reaching somebody on the other side. Anything like that. Now's the time because he's here and you've got him live. So call in if you need to ask a question like that because it'd be a great. You've got him.
I welcome questions, and I'm also already getting some nice reports of the book being very helpful with people who have had a loss or even had a loss after they read the book.
Right.
That they go through that much differently. So my main intention beyond tonight is to be helpful. So.
Well, yes, and thank you. I thank you for that. And it's not just about people that have taken their own life. Do you notice I did not say death because I don't believe in that. I don't think people really go, you can't kill consciousness. I think you just go from one dimension to another. And sort of like changing channels, but you don't really leave. I think consciousness stays intact. And I come from a country, I was born in Pakistan, even though I grew up in London. Poor London. My heart goes out to you people today with the terrorist attack again. And Montreal and the United States. So I'm a British citizen, a Canadian citizen, and an American citizen. But we in Pakistan, the reason I bring this up is because there you wear black when a baby's born, you wear white when somebody passes on, and red is for marriage. And that's because you wear white when someone leaves the planet because it's a good thing. They celebrate that, everybody wears white. And when a child is born, they're wearing black because it's just, here you come again, back here. And it's not a bad thing, but that's how they kind of look at it, which is really interesting.
It's very paradoxical because, we might be really happy that a person's out of suffering and back in the light, and at the same time we can just miss their smell and their hair and their voice and touch,
Right.
We have both things going on at once. It's interesting now, most of the Catholic services I've been to, funerals in the last 10 years or so, they're now wearing white and treating it much more of a celebration of life.
Right. And the last funeral I went to, and it wasn't a funeral, I shouldn't say that, because they made a point to say it was a celebration of life, and it was inside of a greenhouse where all the plants were blooming, and it was her favorite place to be. And it was absolutely wonderful. People had a great time. So, but the same thing too, on the other side of that is like, because I've written about this as well, you cannot stuff the grief either, because if you hold things in, you get shut down, and all you do is delay the healing process, because you cannot go under the grief and you cannot go over the grief. You have to actually go through the grief at some point, right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
But there's something we call, what I tried in my book to convey is what I might call enlightened grieving. There's a temptation to get stuck in something like blaming yourself or blaming the doctors or who,
Right.
And then you will tend to spin around in a cycle you're looking for, even though it may seem like glacially long, that you're moving through a process where you're being very real about what you're feeling. You're getting good support from your community about that. And with suicide, that's often very difficult. Often suicide is even buried and not put on death certificates, and nobody knows it's even occurred.
Right.
When I was going through my process of making these Ocean Heart CD, for example, quite a few people on the team of folks that work on the voice and production and all that came up to me privately and told me that their son had committed suicide or this person had committed suicide. You are right that it doesn't have to be suicide to find this useful. One of the people that read the book said, I've never lost anybody about suicide, but I've lost 4 good friends in my life, and reading the book really helped.
Right, and that's what
put that to perspective.
Yeah, that's what it's all about in the end. I just got a text from a caller who is asking if you talk to people who have passed.
I do some in meditative programs, but I don't do that, quote, professionally, if you will. Mm-hmm. I do know some people like the Chandler that I mentioned in the book, Pam Hogan, and her contact information's in the book. She is the best in the world that I know, is very compassionate and usually very right on, in terms of being able to get information for somebody. So if somebody was looking for contact, there's 2 things I'd suggest. 3, actually. One is first try yourself, and there's lots of tips on how to do that in the book. Just shortly, if you see the person in their highest and finest, think of something that was an essence of them, like their sense of humor. Affirm that love pierces any veil. Those kind of things, and get into a meditative state. You might have the satisfaction of direct contact. Short of that, the Monroe program I mentioned, Lifeline, can work very well. Then you also have working through somebody like Pam the Chandler. And so there's many different ways you might be able to go about initiating some contact. It can be as simple sometimes even as sit down with paper and pencil and begin to imagine what you would say to this person and what they would say back, and just make it up. And after 10 sentences or all, you might go, gee, I don't think I made that one up, and you might feel like you're getting some connection with their consciousness.
Real feedback, exactly. Well, there you go. Some people don't want to call in, and she got an answer, so that's great. And I was a caller from Arizona, so I hope that helped. Or you can still call in at 949-313-8880 if that wasn't answered completely. So, and sometimes people email me or they text me because it's easier than calling, Chris. Sometimes when it's sensitive.
Sure.
She also said that you're giving good info. So
good. Well, that's good to know.
Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes it's hard for people. Or they'll, right after the show's off the air, they're like, I had a question and then I didn't call, and then I should have called, and then I didn't think of the question until later, and all of that, because it's only an hour show. So if that's the case, can people contact you also at the same place?
Yes, on that, if you go to heavenisforhealing.com, the main website will be there, which is called Sync Creation. You don't have to remember that. It'll just be on the top. But if you look at contact there, there'll be an email address that you could email me, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
Okay, great. So are you doing any kind of one-on-one sessions with people anymore, or is it mostly just workshops and
within the
seminars?
home study course, Sync Creation, I mentioned, we have individual coaching. Aside from that, I am mostly doing workshops. I've done 80, I guess maybe almost 85 now, what I call Inner Vegas Adventure workshops, where we use the casino as a feedback place to show you that the kinds of things we talk about that work in manifestation really do work. So we get real quick feedback there. So most of my teaching is in group. either there or at the Monroe Institute.
Well, I love it. You're teaching in a casino. I should do my workshops in a casino from now on. But I'm not laughing because that's a good thing. I just think is now the basis of these, is it psychokinesis more than anything else?
Psychokinesis is used as a training tool. Mm-hmm. This is things like growing seeds in your hand in 5 minutes, bending metal and plastic, throwing dice in patterns, affecting slot machines. And it's used as a feedback device to show you, say we're at the dice table, if you're in a wide open heart space, grounded to the earth in the present moment, feeling one with everything, feeling connected to spirit, usually you get rewarded with money within seconds. If you go into greed, fear, ego, then you get punished by withdrawal of money within seconds. Mm. So it becomes a very quick training device, if you will, to say, this is the kind of energy that we want.
Right.
There we also have spontaneous healings. Folks have woken up the second day of the workshop pain-free from post-polio syndrome for the first time in 20 years. We have folks get home and be able to manifest much better because they've gotten this really good feedback about what does work.
Right.
So that's why we use the casino as a training.
Well, and speaking of casino, I believe, this is why I believe beginner's luck works, because you're so open-hearted you don't know you can't not do what you're doing, and then great rewards come from that, because beginner's luck is just you don't have anything on it yet. And there's
ego's not awake yet on it, and the actual challenge gets to be consistent, because after you do it a few times on your own, then ego comes in and goes, okay, I got it now. You don't have to meditate so long. You don't have to be in an open heart space. We'll just, wear this magic shirt or something.
Right.
And it's kind of fun to take it from that step to getting to be consistent. And so many people attracted to the workshops are things like energy workers, massage therapists, day traders, people that want to work with energy on a consistent basis and find a way to do that over time, even when ego is tempted to come in and kind of muck up the works.
Right, because you can have beginner's luck all the time if you're in that space and you're, in your meditation and your training and keep your. We need the mind, like you need that. You need that to steer, but it needs to be the slave of your spirit that's moving everything forward, the fuel, as you called it, which is a perfect way to explain it, So yeah. I totally agree with that. I did it at something I attended, and I won like 3 door prizes, and when I won the 4th door prize, I was like, okay, I better stop. I was getting a lot of bad stares from people.
People start looking at you kind of funny.
I
go into the casino, the staff goes, here comes Mr. Lucky, so I have to work with that. But it can be a fun way to learn, and the main thing where this gets to be important to me too is that as a culture now we're in such fear that we have Homeland Security in the U.S. that can take you away with no charges, no legal representation, not even tell your family where you are.
Exactly.
In service of trying to, quote, protect us from terrorism. And so we've let fear run rampant. And my biggest phrase I use, I have it on my wall that I created, is fear is expensive, love is priceless, choose wisely. And so in the individual life, even if you don't commit suicide, you will probably have these mini suicides where you do not fully express your full potential in this incarnation because you're afraid.
Right.
Afraid of looking funny or being rejected or failing or who knows. And so my main work is to really get love up to 90% of what you carry and fear down to 10% or so. You don't have to be perfect.
Exactly. So do you work with people who might be considering suicide, or do you have any tips for them or places I know there are suicide hotlines, but what do you suggest?
Well, first I would reinforce the hotline, the national hotline, which is a government line, is 1-800-273-8255. That's 1-800-273-8255. And if you Google suicide prevention, it'll come up. I've called them a couple times just to test them out, and somebody's always answered on first ring and been very caring and knowledgeable.
Good for you.
So there's that. There's talking to friends and family.
Right.
And even as a therapist for 30 years, people would say, if I felt suicidal, I wouldn't tell anybody because they'd put me in a mental hospital or something.
Right.
Or my family would think I was crazy. This is a time to be humble and to say, I'm struggling here. And, and avail yourself of deep friendships, of pastoral counseling, what have you. The book mentions a lot of other things that I think could be of help to someone, it's the kind of thing where I don't know. One time in my life, I felt like, gee, I've kind of got all my good friends, everything. I've kind of been there, done that. And I got stung by a bee and went into anaphylactic shock. And so in a minute or two, I had no blood pressure. And my wife took me in the car with my daughters both screaming to stay. So I used all my willpower to stay here in this body. And afterward, I realized I had been kind of a little tired of how things have been going. And then when I really thought about it, I said, hey, Joe, you got a hand of 5 aces, if you will. Soulmate, you're living with a beautiful place, meaningful career, good health. What am I cashing this in for?
Right.
The other thing I would say is most of us, when you consider suicide, you have to understand your thinking is distorted. You don't understand your own value. When my brother died, we got notes from Las Vegas to North Carolina by bank tellers, grocery store clerks, people, landlord, all saying how much he meant to them. And yet his internal process would be, the world would be better off without me now. I'm of no value. And so just to understand if there's any crazy thinking going on, it's probably that the person is really underestimating the possibility of change. I was depressed for 35 years, and now I've been really happy for 30. The possibility of change is underestimated. Your own value is underestimated to yourself. So get some help.
Right. You keep growing, you keep learning, it's a perspective too. It is. And I've found too that most people that are actually going to do something like that, because I think it's crossed most people's minds, I think, at some point in their lives. But the ones that are serious about it really don't talk about it. But the signs may, I had an ex-boyfriend not long ago who turned, I don't know, something like 67 or something, and said, I said, what are you doing on your birthday? He said, I'm contemplating suicide. And I said, oh, gee, you should have married me. I would have killed you by now. And but I mean, it's like, if you're going to say that to me, I know you're kidding already. Do you know what I mean? It was like...
Well, it's funny. You can see it go both ways. Some people will tentatively try to talk to someone, and... my brother would rebuff. I'm a psychologist, and he's talking pretty frankly, but he'd feel like if medication made him feel better, that would be at the cost of taking him out of touch with reality because his reality was so depressing. He had a reason for not trying different things that were suggested. So I would say...
Right.
Yes, some people don't talk about it at all, but if somebody is talking about it, listen with good seriousness, and rather than judge and try to use platitudes like, look at your life compared to others, you got it good, or tomorrow will be better, just listen with deep respect
exactly
to the person's pain.
Yeah, and their perspective is very different. It's almost like I work with a lot of women who are anorexic or bulimic, and, they're looking in a mirror and they're still seeing a fat girl, when they're, 100 pounds and skin and bones. You can't do that. You have to, I suggest professional help. that they can. But like you said, you tried with your brother. You medications were there. You thought maybe the Monroe Institute might help him, and he just wasn't going for that, right?
No, and part of that can feel, he had such financial restriction. There was often, I can't do this because I can't afford it. And, other, people can come up with excuses, time, finances, embarrassment, but this is your life. So,
yeah, exactly.
Really put all that aside and give it another try.
Yeah, it was interesting because I had just read your book, and then I had just watched a PBS documentary, American Master series that they do, and they did one on Martha Gladhorn, who was a journalist, war journalist, when women were not war journalists, and I think she was actually involved with Ernest Hemingway, and she had this fantastic life, but at the same time she never really had a bestseller, but she was a great writer, and she never really had a relationship that lasted. And towards the end of her life, she was in her 80s and was going blind, and she said, you know what, I wanted to be in control of my mother's death, and I wasn't able to do that, but I am going to be in control of mine. And she said, I'm going to just take a bye-bye pill. And I thought that was fascinating. I never knew she'd done that. I really had never known she did that. But I was like, oh my, that she wanted that control at the last minute, when she could no longer see and no longer take care of herself and write and do what she wanted to do. And it was really hard because she didn't want the stigma, but she did it. Apparently, that's part of history. But people do what people are going to do for their own.
Yeah, and it's good that we just don't judge. My brother, best I can tell, came into the incarnation I knew him in feeling love wasn't real and left feeling like love was real. On a soul level, that might be a great victory, where here it might feel like it was a failure. My mom could do the New York Times crossword puzzle in ink and never make a mistake. The one thing she didn't want to do was lose her mind, and the one thing that happened is she had Alzheimer's. When she died, I said, Mom, what was up with that? It seemed totally against what she wanted consciously. And she said, well, I couldn't figure out another way to get rid of all my religious guilt. Your dad and I had been married 64 years. It gave him time to learn how to cook and clean and make new friends and develop his own independence. And she went on for 10 minutes showing how, for her, Alzheimer's was a good plan, if you will, from a spiritual perspective. So we just cannot judge it.
Now, do you think, Dr. Joe, that we kind of plan our life ahead of time before we get here? Because I kind of feel that way. I feel like we have an agenda or a map or something.
I think a lot of things are talked about as possible experiences for us, and then we have free will while we're here, as well as the people that we're interacting with. So I believe you can change contracts, change what, say you came feeling like you had to atone for something. The universe is not making you do that like in a karmic way, but you might feel that way. Once you get here, to me, the law of love transcends the law of karma. Not everybody agrees with me on that. But
no, I think the law of love transcends everything. But I do, and that led to a really good part of your book, too, where you talked about if there is a God, why is there so much pain? And part of that is we have free will. And,
if we're free, we're free. And if we're free to drive drunk and hit a child by mistake. We're free to be obsessed with money and all kinds of things. And we have been, I think, created as free beings.
Exactly. There you go. I see this hour just flew by, And I
Yes,
knew
it did.
I knew it would. I was going to open the lines again, but unless you have a really, really quick question, we're out of time. But and somebody did ask a question via text. I think it was easier for them to do it that way than to call in, which is fine. I'm always open to that. It's much, but anyway, this is a really great book. Heaven is for Healing: A Soul's Journey After Suicide. Dr. Joseph Gallenberger. It's a fascinating book. I also want to mention again the Ocean Heart, the CD. It's a meditation for healing a broken heart. Also just for facing stresses of anything that's, keeping you down, hurting you, to find inner peace. And the website is heavenisforhealing.com. And you mentioned something called Sync.
Yes, SYNC, and then the word creation. So like HemiSync is the type of meditation technology.
Right.
So SYNCcreation.com is my main site, and that's a home study course. So we have products there. Website has lots of free articles about manifestation tips, how to use energy healing, all kinds of things. And also then several CDs at under $20 is all the way up to the big home study course that I mentioned that has individual coaching in it. So trying to have a variety of tools for people that might help them in these kind of things.
Oh, great. And we got another text. Couldn't call in, but listening. Great show. So there you go.
Good.
I love it.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. There's another caller calling in from Nebraska. So there you go. I love it. Thank you for listening to the people that texted in. And for you, Dr. Joe Gallenberger, you're doing great work again. And you even mentioned the hotline that works. It's 800-273-8255. If anyone out there is contemplating, suicide or knows anybody there that is, there's help. There's help out there, and people will help you if that's the case. Because this is not a book about, you go on to a great place. This is a book about how to deal with it and how to move beyond that grief for people who are left behind, and also what's going on with the people that have moved on from that. And it's not such a stigma. So I'm really glad you wrote this, and I'm really glad you're doing the work you're doing. Please continue.
Thank you. I plan to. It gives me great joy when I hear that somebody was helped. So
Thank you
for having me on, Svet.
Are you working on another book at all?
I probably will.
Okay.
But this new baby has just been born, so it's barely out of diapers. I'm not ready to consider having another right now.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us tonight. I really appreciate it. Have a good night. Thank you for joining us tonight. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, that was a great show. I loved it. Don't go away. I just want to say that there's more great shows to come. I have a really good show next week about somebody who's written Sandra Martin, but it's a long story and I'm running out of time, but she's really fascinating and you're going to love that show. But I have a blog that's going to get up and running again. My website is ServetHassan.com, ServetHassan.com. Private consultations, blogs, podcasts, everything else where you can hear the show again if you want to on my YouTube channel. I'm starting up a bunch of new things for the fall, actually. I thought that they'd be up and running and they're not yet, but I don't mind that because I think things should be done right. And then done well, because, we just talked about psychokinesis and moving matter, and it has to be done with an open heart or it doesn't work anyway. So I'm working on it. You'll see new and wonderful, spectacular things soon. And other than that, my work will continue in other directions as well. And even that works about what I'm talking about anyway, because it's all about being you to the full. Dr. Joe Gallenberger was talking about how you have to do things with an open heart, a loving heart, ego, just you knowing you're connected to source and all of that. And that comes back all around to being you to the full, because be you to the full is what's really beautiful. And then psychokinesis or not, even though that helps, you can have whatever you want. You just have to live in your heart and an open heart and go forward being you to your fullest. So do that. I love you all. Thank you for listening, and I'll have another great show next Sunday. Join me. Thank you. Good night.